Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We have an exciting episode, but first, I want to say hi to Jamie. How is it going there, sister?
Hi, very good. Good to see you.
You too. We are going to be talking about a topic that I think will be of interest to many people. It's about how processed food and anxiety interplay. In this world that we live in, anxiety plagues so many people, and we are learning that anxiety and the effects of processed food on the brain can be closely related. They are so closely linked that they often travel in tandem, like a two-seat bicycle. So they improve together and they also weaken together. In fact, I might even start out with a question. What do you think comes first, food issues or anxiety issues? Personally, from taking a look at my own journey, I have no idea. I don't know, but all I do know is that I've always been high strung and nervous, and definitely ADHD as a kid, a very busy brain and body, and at the same time, loving sugar from my earliest memory. I've craved it since I was a child and had this high drive to get more as long as I can remember. I felt like a constant battle between wanting to eat healthier and giving into those intense urges. But what often puzzled me was whether my anxiety was causing me to turn to these foods or the foods themselves were exacerbating my anxiety. I can say that the minute my anxiety surges, that irrational hunger shoots through the roof for me. Cookie, cookie, cookie was like this thought bubble traveling around above my brain, and really until I caved in. So, Jamie, do you have an opinion on what you think comes first, whether it's the processed foods or anxiety? What's your experience been?
It depends on the person, for sure. It depends on the person and their personal history. For me, I think they came in together for sure. So let's start by acknowledging that this can be a deeply personal and complex issue. Many of us have experienced the cycle of craving and consuming ultra-processed foods, despite knowing they might not be beneficial for our health. For me personally, the struggle has led me to question whether my food habits are a response to anxiety or if they contribute to it. The dilemma isn't uncommon. Research suggests that ultra-processed foods can trigger pleasure centers in our brains, leading to cravings and potentially addictive behaviors. These foods often provide a temporary sense of comfort or relief from stress and anxiety due to their impact on neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine.
So we're kind of left with that chicken and the egg dilemma,
Yes,
right? Food
yes,
and,
for sure.
and food addiction versus anxiety, or you could maybe even say the effects of processed food and anxiety. But since we know it's often debated whether food issues or anxiety come first, some researchers have suggested that anxiety can lead individuals to seek comfort in foods that are high in sugar, fat, salt, and additives, which are no surprise to us. These
Yes.
foods temporarily boost our moods due to their impact on brain chemicals like dopamine, like we have just mentioned. And it provides a brief escape from those anxious feelings. And when you're feeling like that, you will do anything to stop the anguish.
Yes. And we also know that consumption of ultra-processed foods can lead to biochemical changes in our brains, potentially reinforcing addictive behaviors. This can create a cycle where craving these foods really intensifies. And it doesn't matter what the initial trigger was. It's just that once they build, once you give in to those processed foods and ultra-processed foods, those cravings just continue to build and build and build on themselves. And again, it really, I believe, is driven, maybe initially by our own brain chemistry bringing us to the food, but then after that, the food just sort of takes over and has a mind of itself.
Yeah, that's so true. And then anxiety drives us to seek comfort in the
Yes.
familiar, highly palatable food. It becomes this cycle. We eat these foods to alleviate anxiety momentarily, but in the long term, then they can contribute to physical and emotional distress, perpetrating the cycle of addiction.
Yes, yes. And really, this is big stuff beyond the whole idea of, immediate gratification. Um, the use of ultra processed foods can contribute to weight gain for sure, metabolic disorders, and of course we know mental
Right.
health it gets compromised. Anxiety may worsen as a result of these health issues. And this really, has this cycle Paige was talking about of physical ailments and emotional distress.
Yeah, it's so hard to break free of that when you suffer from these things. And so it begs the
Totally.
question, what causes anxiety? Where does that come from? It's a combination of genetics, environmental, psychological, physiological factors. When you get into that, genetics, if you have a history of anxiety, there's a likelihood that it could follow you. Brain chemistry, if you have imbalances in the brain, in your neurotransmitters. Trauma and stress certainly are huge factors. Those, if you experience trauma as a child, for example, that can trigger anxiety. If you have emotional abuse of any kind or significant life changes, all those things can trigger it. And medical conditions, thyroid problems, heart disease, chronic illnesses, all those, and even medications that treat those can cause some anxiety. And of course, substance use of any kind can exacerbate anxiety.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the list, continues the whole idea of personality traits. You've got folks with people who have what's called, highly sensitive personality, and they can have a lot of anxiety because everything really gets to their senses in deep ways. That's something that certainly I deal with on a regular basis, is knowing that I'm very sensitive to sound, very sensitive to certain environments and emotional environments around me. It is something that I have to constantly be aware of. Folks who have the idea, really, they don't have a trust in anything bigger than themselves, so they kind of put the weight of the world on themselves, and that can lead to perfectionist tendencies. Because they feel like if they don't do it perfectly, that it won't come out right. They're sort of trying to control the world. If they have low self-esteem, that absolutely connects with that, and it can create anxiety just from the negative self-talk. And all of these personality traits can contribute to or be outcomes of intense anxiety. We also have environmental factors. We have a high stress job, financial difficulties, lack of social support, unstable living situation. All of that can contribute to anxiety. We know psychological factors like depression and mental health disorders. Those can increase anxiety overall. We have diet and lifestyle, of course, the whole point of what we're here talking about today. Um, that also, not only does that include ultra processed foods and processed foods, it also can include lack of exercise or sleep, even sleep related disorders like sleep apnea, um, and night terrors and other things that we have heard folks that we've worked with dealing with. These can
Right.
come up again and again and again, and can cause major cracks in the health and well-being of an individual, and that can absolutely contribute to their anxiety. Then we've got the gut health and the health of what's going on in our cells and in our gut microbiota. And that is a very big contributor. If our gut is out of whack, right? They don't call our gut the second brain just because it's a fun way to refer to it. It truly is. There's many studies now linking the neurotransmitters that we think are in our brain, that they're actually originating in our guts. So understanding this
Yeah,
is a
I'm really
massive thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that point about gut health. I think that can't be minimized. I think our food just really plays a huge part in every facet of our being. So this opens the category, a subcategory called food anxiety, which refers to feelings of worry, fear, or distress related to food and eating. It can manifest in various ways, including concerns about food choices, meal planning, body image, and the impact of food on health. And this anxiety can stem from multiple factors.
Yes, absolutely. And so we know that there's some things that bring up food anxiety on, and those can be dietary restrictions. And so many folks, myself included, I know that I will, if I believe that a food is off limits to me, because it's bad for me, or I can't stop myself, or I can't trust myself around it. If my why is not truly deep and strong enough, as to why those foods make me sick, then the whole idea of just restricting it without a deep enough why or deep enough understanding of what the food truly does to me, that active restriction can create anxiety around that food, which can lead directly to a binge.
Yeah.
Body image issues, right? If you've stress about how food that we eat impacts the shape or size of our body, that absolutely can increase anxiety around food. Nutritional concerns, right? Understanding that each food has a nutrient profile. Some foods are much better nutrient profiles than others. Some are much more complete than others. And the whole idea that, we can have anxiety, oh, this food isn't really good for me, so I'm not going to eat it, or this food, is not healthy enough. So I don't want to eat that. I'm going to eat much more of the healthier food, even though I don't enjoy it. That can create all kinds of food anxiety. And these, I think, would fall under the whole idea of the theme of eating disorders, right? This anxiety drives eating disorders. And that's very important to understand. And for me, in my eating disorder history, my fears of all of these things that I just listed absolutely contributed to my eating disorders, and made my life with food very complicated, very, very complicated. A lot of it was not only coming from what was inside my head, but what was perpetuated out there in the media. So again, these anxieties we have around food, they obviously can be worsened in social situations, but they can also lead us to avoid social situations, avoid life, stay home and not want to go out. And it really can totally impact our daily life in every way. So it's important to address these concerns through counseling, through a support network of other folks that are healing from anxiety around food, and use and abuse of food, through education. And again, sort of assembling up, my favorite phrase, assembling a team around you to help figure your way out of it.
Yeah. All those that you mentioned, I mean, I'm just shaking my head going, yep, 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 yeah. All of those, just for people that struggle with the effects of processed food, I think these are very common in everybody's life. I mean, aren't you familiar with every single one of those things on the list too? So I was thinking, before we get any further, I would like for Jamie and I to maybe describe food anxiety from each of our perspectives. Here's what it felt like to live inside my body, my brain, on just a random Tuesday. Before recovery, I would wake up without a plan. So that was a big one. Have a semi-healthy breakfast, off to work out, and then the day would just literally start going downhill from there because of the lack of planning. That's when the grabbing would start, and I would be chasing these blood sugar spikes all day long, which of course played into the hunger and anxiety simmering below the surface all day long, literally up and down all day long. And that's when the chatter would start in the brain. Okay, what's my next meal? Should it be the M&Ms or the fast food? And if it's fast food, where do I want to go? Mexican, Chinese, American, or leftovers from home? And then if I would overeat at lunch, do I have to skip dinner to make up for it? And how will I explain that away in front of my family? Or will I have to do a second workout today to undo what I already know that I will inevitably do at lunch? And when will I fit that second workout into my schedule? Will I have to rearrange a meeting to work it in? And I hope I didn't have to run any errands, because I don't know about you, but when I ran errands, I knew I would have to check out, and I knew there'd be candies and cookies at the checkout. And what if I cave in and can't control myself then? And I'm already so nervous about what I'm going to do because I'm aware I have no control. And I'm already depressed about what I fear I'm going to do, which is crazy that I was already suffering from depression before I even did the act, because I already knew what was coming. All these racing rapid fire thoughts are running through my head at breakneck speed all day long, jumping from thought to thought. And heaven forbid if I'm on a clean strike, because every day I'm just asking myself, will this be the day that I break that streak? Will I be able to avoid temptation. I mean, I would almost look at the clock. Okay, I made it another hour without caving in. How long is this going to last till I lose control?
Yeah.
I literally had these two opposite states of mind, that I was super strict and flying high, or completely out of control. It was exhausting to live inside my body and brain. You are literally in this mental fight all day long. This went on for decades in my life. This is literally how I lived every day. It was a miracle I could get anything else done. But ironically, I was an overachiever, which didn't make sense in all these other areas of my life. But this one little thing, I literally had no control over, and I didn't understand what was happening to me. And I would look around, and it didn't look like anybody else was suffering like I was suffering. So it didn't make sense to me. I really felt like I was on an island by myself. Very, very
Mhm.
painful. And especially the feeling alone and thinking, I just am a person that lacked willpower, blaming myself for this. And yeah, I just didn't know what to do about it. I never heard anyone else talking about it. And it just kills
Mhm.
me that anybody should be suffering like this when we have answers. What about you? Do you want to share what a typical day was like
Yeah,
for
I
you?
think
Any of this relatable to you? Sound familiar?
yeah, it definitely sounds familiar. I think you summed it up well. For me, it just would be vacillating between, restricting and then allowing myself the thought of having the food and what that would look like. And when I was using the food, it was really deep, um, a deep. I was all in with it. I never had moments of restriction. It was just always about what I was going to eat at the next meal. And then before I understood what, that, food could have this sort of addictive property and create an addictive response in me, when I was trying to moderate processed and ultra processed foods, I really, that's when I started to have that whole, total restriction. And because I restricted, because I was afraid of how I would act around the food, I didn't understand what it truly did to me. I didn't really identify with what it was doing to my body, because I didn't understand that truly yet, or didn't internalize it. I would just restrict the food, which would only make me, maybe I could get 6 days, and then I would just have a binge, and I'd feel so guilty, and then I would set up another 6 days of freedom and then have a binge. So it was the binge and restrict cycle weekly, involving, including exercise, bulimia, to try to work off what I'd just eaten. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was, a cycle every week for probably 2 years, maybe 3 years. So it was miserable. It was miserable. And
Measure.
I thought just because I was wearing the same size clothes that I was winning, but I wasn't winning, really. I mean, I wasn't free at all. I was, white knuckling to keep it all together.
Yeah.
So once I understood the difference, between truly internalizing what the food does to me and how I act with it, or what its effects on my body and brain, then I'm able to stay truly disconnected from it, and not feel the pull towards it, because I know that it really is super harmful. Just like I don't ever feel a pull towards any kind of recreational or illegal drugs. I just
That's true.
like that seems crazy to me. That because I know how addictive they are.
Right.
That when somebody picks up addictive drugs, especially like those really highly addictive street drugs like heroin, and I guess meth would be similar, but I've heard the stories of heroin where, it's literally an immediate, you are addicted immediately. There's no, from that very first use, there is no going back. And that to me feels like that's like hell. So why would
Yeah.
I, once I understood that I'm able to, um, you know, I'm able to release myself from that kind of pull, right? Not heroin like pull, but an addictive pull from food. Why would I not take that?
Yeah, I agree. It's so funny that our stories are so similar, and I would think it would be the same for anybody that fought this. So let's talk
Yes.
a little bit about how it feels once you discover you actually have a food addiction, or should I say a processed food addiction, or even better said, just a reaction to consuming processed food. Let's talk about how that affected your anxiety once you discovered what was going on. For me, it changed my world. I've told this story so many times, but driving down the highway, listening to a podcast, a speaker talked about the blood flow between the frontal lobe and the center brain, and how the frontal lobe carries is that logic center, braking system, rational thought. And when you have these cues and trigger, that blood flow migrates back to feed the addiction center of your brain. And I just started weeping when I was driving because there was an answer. And even though, I didn't love the answer, but at least I understood I wasn't broke. There wasn't something wrong with me. There was a reason that I was reacting the way I would react. And I was so flooded with relief because I knew what I was working with then. I could then focus on how can I reshift blood flow? What can I do when I'm in those situations? There was light. There was light at the end of the tunnel, which meant the torture chamber was going to be coming to an end. Do you have a specific moment burnt in your memory where the light bulb went on for you, that you discovered what this was?
Probably it was over a period of time in 2017 when I heard enough thought leaders and researchers talk about the effects of the food on us physically and mentally and emotionally, that I started to put the pieces together and realized what was happening and what had been happening for me for a long time. Especially for me, it was the spikes and crashes that would affect my energy levels and the way that I could emotionally connect with people or not. That really added to my awareness, like, oh, okay, wow, this is not just hypoglycemia. This is, an hyperinsulinic response to hyperpalatable ultra processed food.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It was relief at first, and just because of my childhood and because of some of the false beliefs that I hold on to, I immediately began shaming myself with it. How could you let this happen? What did you do? I can't believe that this is going on, all the things. So I had to remind myself, after getting my ground, back under me and feet back under me, I had to remind myself that this is, I'm not alone. And I got into a group. First, it was a 12-step recovery group. And I heard people talking about how they would give up entire food groups. And I was just like, there's no way that I could ever do that. Until I did, right? Until I realized I needed to. And that was by 2020. And I was like, okay, I really can't, I have to give these particular food groups up. And then I just, it felt eye-opening.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I love the point that you brought up about shame. Our goal is to alleviate people from that shame. We don't want anybody to feel shame. I did. I just, it was embarrassing to me how weak I was, but I thought it was always just my fault. So we don't want anybody to suffer thinking it's their fault. Jamie has a famous line that you're reacting exactly how your body was designed to react when you consume those certain foods. It's your body's functioning just perfectly.
Sure.
So breaking free from the effects of ultra-processed food and managing anxiety requires a multifaceted approach. So the question becomes, once we understand what we're fighting and start an active recovery program such as Real Food Recovery, how much of that anxiety clears up? For me, it was night and day. The mental chatter got quiet. The feeling of complete out of control sensation went away in large part. And I would go as far as saying that I actually discovered what it felt like to experience peace and calm for the first time in my life. I'd never known what that was like. I didn't ever feel that sensation ever. So it was glorious. It was like I had an extra space in my brain to concentrate on other things. I started reading big girl books and was able to focus on other interests. I am sure that we could have never developed an entire processed food recovery program or any other program had I been deep in the food. Jamie, what happened to your anxiety once you started into active recovery?
Well, for me, yeah, it really was multifaceted. It wasn't just about the food. I'd spent a lot of time in recovery programs and recovery methodologies and working tools and programs for a little while before the food was taken out. Specifically, anything with sugar in it and anything with gluten in it, for me. So that really, those recovery programs gave me a really good foundation for my anxiety management, because I was able to start to dissect what was going on inside of me and have tools to work with it. And then once I was able to take the food and food ingredients and all of the ultra processed crap out, then it got a lot easier and a lot clearer to see what I was dealing with and then apply the tools that I learned in my other areas of recovery.
Yeah. So the question then comes up of what actually causes the anxiety that comes from the processed food themselves. We're learning that several factors contribute to that relationship, and you might be surprised that nutritional deficiencies top the list. So if you're somebody you're eating these processed foods all day long, you are really going to be void of the vitamins and minerals, omega-3s, fatty acids, those that directly affect brain function and mental health, and will definitely increase anxiety levels. The other thing is high sugar and refined carbohydrates. These refined carbohydrates can cause, we talked about that a little earlier, these rapid spikes and drops in sugar levels. Those fluctuations, I don't know about you, but major mood swings, irritability off the charts, and increased anxiety from that really affected me personally, especially since I was such a sugar addict. It was literally up and down with the sugar spikes all day long. The artificial additives, many processed foods contain these artificial additives, preservatives, and flavor enhancers, which can have adverse effects on the brain and contribute to anxiety and other mental health issues. I know for me, even the plant-based sweeteners had a tremendous effect on me and really kept my cravings alive as well.
Yes, absolutely. And when we think about, again, what else plays into this, that gut brain axis we were talking about earlier, the gut microbiome that we have plays a crucial role in our mental health. So a diet high in processed foods can negatively affect our gut microbiome, and also that can exacerbate what's already going on in the gut. So if you have, dysbiosis related to other traumas and other stressors and other life events that are not food related, and you add processed food or ultra processed food on top of it, it can really exacerbate the issue. And a diet high, in these foods can certainly dysregulate an already dysregulated microbiome. And the gut-brain axis it's literally a bidirectional communication, right? That's why they call it the gut-brain axis, because that whole idea that what's happening in our gut can really disrupt our brain function. It's very real. It's very real. I'm so glad that we live in this era, Paige, that science is beginning to understand that.
Right.
I wish I could be alive 100 years from now to see, or 500 years from now to see what they're saying. Are they going to talk about this, the age before the gut brain axis? Like we talk about that doctor who didn't wash his hands, and he was, whenever he would deliver babies and then their mothers would die. Are we going to talk about, and now we hear that story of that doctor and we're like, oh my God, how could he be like, that's crazy. How would you not wash your hands before you're operating on someone, or in interacting with a patient that way? Like, that's insane. And now who knows what 500 years what they'll say, or 200 years what they'll say about us, right? In the 80s, 1980s, where we didn't understand the gut brain axis or even know what it was. And they're like, could you imagine living in an era where you thought you only had one brain? Oh my God, now we know we have two brains. Like, I just can't. I'd love to see what they'll say. So maybe I'll come back.
Well, and who
Uh,
knows, maybe we'll be alive in 100 years if you keep taking care of yourself like you are.
there you go. There you go. The whole idea of inflammation is something else we need to talk about. Inflammation from processed foods can be, systemic, and it really obviously can include the brain. Chronic inflammation has been linked to various mental health disorders, including anxiety for sure. And addressing these issues really involves reducing the intake or eliminating the intake of the processed and ultra processed foods and incorporating a balanced diet rich in whole foods, which can help improve all of these issues.
I agree with you completely on all those things. So let's talk about what we specifically do in recovery that aids in anxiety reduction. I'm going to speak for myself, and I can't wait to hear Jamie's answers. But for me, the biggest anxiety reducers is having just a plan in place, big emphasis on food prep. And the one single act that changed everything, that one thing changed everything for me from dark to light, just having a plan, and not just for organizational purposes. It was a gift to my brain. It's like the brain said, thank you, lady. You're finally getting it together. And I can finally relax a little bit and not just be fingernails on a chalkboard all day long. I can calm down. You can calm down now that you have a plan. Before you go to bed at night, you've got a plan in place for the next day. What about you? You have a big one?
Really, it was the food healing was a direct response to the other healing that I was doing. So once I was able to apply my other recovery tools, I was able to see clearer what I needed to do with the food. And I was able to see how the food was getting in the way of me recovering in a way that I wanted to. And I was really making a lot of progress in other areas of recovery, but the food was holding me back. And then it was like, okay, I need to break up with these ingredients or these groups of foods. And that worked. That was my journey. But for others, they'll say they probably need to take the food out so that they can get some traction in other areas of their recovery. But I think it's different for each person. It might be denial. It might be, just lack of awareness, a lack of self-awareness. It's everyone's journey is unique. I don't think there's any one path forward, but I definitely think it would have been a lot easier to take out the food first and then tackle the other areas of recovery, but that wasn't my journey. So the other thing that recovery helps with is reframing our thoughts. We recognize that recovery is really, in this whole theme of thought control. It incorporates and is part of the theme of thought control. We really place a high emphasis on asking if the things we're thinking are true or not. Since we're naturally wired towards the negative, it takes effort to put a positive spin on everything, and that's just human condition. And it can be done. It's a skill set, like anything else. It's a muscle that we need to develop. Our brains really truly only know what we tell it. So the fact that we can tell it positive, true things, even if they're not necessarily true in reality yet, I think is a very, very helpful skill.
Yeah. So since we know that a calm brain doesn't crave, let's talk for a little bit about some skills that help reduce anxiety and invite peace. One of my favorites, I've talked about this over and over again, is just putting your hands on your cheeks saying, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. That works like a charm for me every time when I'm in a sticky situation.
For me, it is truly deep breathing. It's working out. It's movement of some kind. It's walking indoors, outdoors. There's no there's no way for me to get a better handle on my anxiety than it is for me to move my body. It just brings me into the present and keeps me focused on what I need to. Another one that we really strongly believe in is nature bathing and the whole getting outside. It's just a fancy word for getting outside. Get outside, move your body, get yourself some sunshine, get yourself interacting with others, and it is absolutely a wonderful way to get grounded.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. We just got back from Colorado this past week, and my daughter and her husband, sometimes their 5-year-old twins, would go out and take a walk in the forest that was around the house where we were staying. The whole time we're just all going, oh, look at this view. Oh, just feel the air, smell the pine trees. I mean, beautiful way. I wish I could wake up like that every morning and start my day that way. So I agree with you about the exercise and how that just really, for me, invites that surge of endorphins. And I'm settled down the rest of the day. So we touched on this briefly already, but a food plan and prep in advance before you go to bed at night, having a plan for the next day with your food prepped and ready to go. I can't stress that enough for me in my anxiety reduction. And I have a little saying, I like to focus on the fact that your day starts the night before. That also helps reduce anxiety if I can start pre-planning my day the evening before I go to bed at night.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the whole idea of, in addition to food prep or making sure that you've paved your way with good grocery shopping habits
Yeah,
and having a plan for your food, even if you don't have containers of your food already prepped, at least you've got the ingredients right at hand that you can take and throw together into a bowl or onto a plate that gives you what you need.
right.
And that absolutely helps. And really making sure that when you're doing that preparation or stocking your fridge or grocery work, that you're also cleaning your environment out, clearing the temptation and cues and triggers. I went through this weekend, my husband and I were reorganizing some things, cleaning some things out around the house. And one of the things I wanted to do was our pantry and cleaning out things that I know have ingredients that I do not tolerate them anymore. I cannot have them. They trigger all kinds of other reactions in my body and brain. And they might be, it's ingredients in sauces, ingredients in canned goods, ingredients in jars of food that didn't bother me at all before. And now
Mm.
there's another group of foods as I heal that just are need to be taken out. So
Mhm.
a box, bringing it to the food pantry of all of my donated food, and that's, I think that environment is a very big deal. And I also we moved that cabinet of junk food around so that we could combine things and put it in a place that I don't really ever open, but my husband, father-in-law have all their stuff in it, because what was happening was, because things were not as organized as they could be, there was junk food sort of hanging around outside of that cabinet in my father-in-law's side of the house, and it was triggering. It was to the point where I would see it and be like, oh, I think I'd like some of that. Or,
Yeah.
that genre. It wasn't that food. I don't go and steal his food, but it was like, oh, I'd like to have some of that. Or I think that cereal would be good. Having some cereal would be good. Or, oh, that would, it wasn't, it was not, it was the classic scenario of food cues again and again and again and again. Commercials I can easily get over because you can turn them off or change the channel or just pause and fast forward through them. But you can't do that in food cues in your home. So the environment is a very big deal.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like I said, there's 13 of us in a home this past week, and it was cookies, potato chips, ice cream, pizza. I mean, snack bars just constantly. And that was tough. That was really, really tough, because the brain's going, well, just a little won't hurt, and then the floodgates are open after that. So I agree with you hugely on that point. Having a support group is a game changer. Many try to go it alone, and we believe you can get further faster with a recovery support group. We've had tremendous success at Real Food Recovery. We know that connection is the opposite of addiction, and you can find a lot of peace and joy connecting with others who understand you. There's no better feeling than communicating with someone who knows you immediately and understands everything that you're describing.
Very true. Very true. And the whole idea of, for me, especially being a student of the game, right? Making sure that I understand how these foods impact my body and brain, bringing continuous education, to the forefront. I will say for me, it's important not to go too much, because over education, over information can feel overwhelming for me. So I have to have a good balance there, or I have to know who to go to, that I trust to talk about these topics or to listen about these topics. But there's a ton of information out there. My favorite is YouTube, because you can see the researchers, you can see the physicians, you can see the doctors talking to you in long format. The short format, quick consumption, thought leadership is not really thought leadership to me. I'd like to get a little bit more science with my information. And again, just be wary of being overwhelmed.
No, I agree with you. I do have to limit myself when it gets to be too much. Journaling is a big help for some. It allows you to organize these thoughts into complete sentences that are helpful and provide feedback to yourself. I'm not great in this area. I do journal once a week for about my family, but a lot of people do it every day to ward off anxiety. They might even keep a gratitude journal that helps.
Yeah, having the whole idea of, again, having the time, or making the time to do some emotional processing or inner family work, all of that really helps, because again, when we're able to pay attention to the emotions we feel, that can really help us unwind the desire that we have for food.
And I'm going to put a plug. Yeah, I'm going to put a plug in. Our podcast released just last week that I think it's called Inner Family Work That Works. Jamie does a wonderful job that talks about emotional processing. I just listened to it. And even though I was there, I was on the edge of my seat listening to her explain all of that, the inner family work and the parts and how they communicate. Very, very helpful. So last one, food anxiety may feel overpowering and consuming, but it does not have to be permanent. That's our message today. Understanding what you're dealing with is the first step in living a longer, high quality, healthy life. And I hope this podcast provided some type of insight and encouragement for your own journey towards a healthier relationship with food and a more balanced state of mind. We have to remember to prioritize our mental and physical health every step of the way.
Yeah, that's right. And the biggest concern that we have is that if this is left untreated, the effects of processed food use really become progressive, right? So when that happens, the anxiety that we have becomes progressive. And finding a support group is very critical. Folks that have an understanding about, how processed foods affect us, body and mind and spirit, and also making sure that we're taking proactive steps to reclaim our health and well-being. So we can reach out to us at Real Food Recovery if you think of any of the things we're talking about today apply to you.
Okay, we have a few listener questions. The first one is, I can't figure out if I have food anxiety or just anxiety in general. How do I know which is which? That's a good question. So those with food anxiety are continuously preoccupied with food thoughts. That was me. And the consequences of food and avoidance of food. In our recovery program at RFR, we like to get people to a place of food neutrality. When you are in a place where you are unaffected by what to trigger you, then that shows signs that you are well on your way to having food anxiety under control.
Second question. This was, how long will it take to get my food anxiety under control? That really, it varies. There's no magic bullet in here. There's no, one size fits all answer. Unfortunately, it really varies. It varies on many things. And sometimes when you do get that food anxiety under control, you'll have life anxiety that comes and gets you back into a place where it's important to learn tools that you can cope with that without using the food, which will just perpetuate the anxiety even worse. So again, it's complicated. It's possible to sort of disconnect food from your anxious loops and patterns, But it's not going to be once that's disconnected, life still gives you lots of things to be anxious about. So it's important to find different ways to cope with life on life's terms.
Yeah. Next one, my food anxiety is so bad that I don't want to leave the house or engage in social activities, especially at night. I'm so terrified it will cause an out of control binge. What do I do about this? I understand about the evening activities. I don't like that either. And just know what you're able to handle in the beginning is not what you're able to handle as you build up these recovery muscles. So
That's right.
even though we are actively in recovery, there are still some social situations that I decline if I'm not up to it. I think Jamie will agree with that too in her recovery experience. I don't personally care for the evening activities. They always include food every single time. And I know that's when my defenses are low and my decision fatigue has set in. I know that connection to others is important. So instead of doing activities that involve food, I invite friends to take a walk or do some other type of activity. So maybe it's not that you are actually worried about the social activities, but more so the type of activity. So just find something that complements your goals, and your true friends will support you in maybe taking a walk or doing something active during the day.
Yeah, I agree. Last question. I know I don't get my 8 hours of sleep most nights. Do you think lack of sleep affects my food? Yes, absolutely. It affects anxiety overall. And it can not, I don't know that it affects food anxiety. It affects food cravings, which can create food anxiety. So again,
Yeah.
it's understanding those interconnection points in our bodies are going to seek energy, right? Because if they're looking for energy from lack of sleep, they're going to seek energy from the quickest source, which is typically in our environment, in our culture, hyper palatable, ultra processed foods. So that's something that you have to be. And I've gone through a period of a loss of sleep for several weeks due to some physical therapy I'm going through, and it has been very important for me to take out all of the other stuff that I would, crave normally, so that I can know what's really a true hunger versus a craving because I'm struggling with lack of sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's absolutely important to understand that connection. And the best thing you can do when you have lack of sleep is to carve time out in the day after to take some naps, to get some rest, to get out in nature, to go connect with people socially, not at a restaurant, to go and do some things that bring you joy, and bring you energy if you need them. Um, and lots of water. Another great tip will help. So again, there's ways to do it without food.
Yeah, nice. This has been a great episode. I think it's really important to talk about anxiety since it's so prevalent in our society today. And once we clean up our food, like I said, I think they really move in tandem. I think it's helpful to improve the anxiety as well. So thank you for your input. I always enjoy being together. And if you want to find out more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.